The Rifleman. The Rifleman and his son have to cross a desert. Will they survive or will the buzzards get them? Battle of the Network shows. Join Rick Brooks and Mike Kogel as they explore the TV of the 70s and 80s through hand-picked episodes of their favorite and not-so-favorite series.
Welcome to Battle of the Network shows. I'm Mike.
And I'm Rick. Hello, everyone.
And this is our retro episode for this season.
Yeah.
Now, we already did talk about the Dennis the Menace show from before our normal era, but it was coupled with a cartoon from the 80s, so we're not considering that.
Right.
That was a retro supplement.
Yes, and we hope you enjoy a little bit more retro this season. I think it's warranted.
Sure. And we're going to be talking about the Rifleman.
Yeah. There's not a whole lot of Westerns in our usual time period. So I think this is a good opportunity to go look at one of the dominant genres of television for quite a while. And The Rifleman is a show I very much enjoy.
Yeah, I had not seen much of it, or maybe any of it, and yet was aware of it, and somehow aware of Chuck Connors.
Well, he's a big presence. It's tough not to be aware of him if you're anywhere near him.
Yeah, but not too aware. Now, the closest thing we've done to Western, I guess, is Little House.
Yeah, I think you're right.
I mean,
well, we did Best of the West.
Oh, we did do Best of the West. That's right.
But not the same kind of thing.
Yeah, and other shows that had you could say a Western influence. The Master.
Okay. Yeah.
And not the particular episode of Buck Rogers we did, but some of those had a Western influence.
Sure.
And, Battlestar Galactica had the one episode on a cowboy planet. And I think that's the official name of the planet.
Yeah, the Cowboy Planet.
Cowboy Planet, yeah.
And then, of course, there was Alice, which took place in Arizona.
That's true. Yeah. Incredible Hulk.
Yeah, some of that was...
I don't know.
Yeah, we've had a little bit of Western influence, but there just aren't a whole lot of examples of Westerns in the 70s and even into the 80s. There are some, but they stand out.
I mean, Gunsmoke.
Yeah, Gunsmoke, and even Bonanza sort of crept into the early 70s.
Yeah.
And Gunsmoke was, kind of started in the 50s, so...
The 1850s, right?
Yeah, 1850s, yeah. So it didn't originate in our time period. As far as, like, Westerns that originate in our time period, they're even really rare if you go that route. And not a lot of them lasted, And, yeah, Little House is an interesting one. I've seen people talk about, whether that should be considered a Western or not. I don't really consider it a Western. Did we talk about that?
We probably did.
Yeah, it's like a frontier drama
yes.
or something,
yeah.
maybe.
I think in a broader sense, it probably, in that it's about Western America.
Yeah.
But in sort of the cowboy mythic genre Western.
Yeah.
Yeah, it certainly doesn't fit.
Right. Now,
I think, I watched an episode where featuring Michael Landon as a guest star, and I think maybe he learned some lessons from this. Solid parenting. Take off your shirt. That's about it. I mean,
yeah. Well,
Little House didn't really have a lot of justified homicide.
Yeah. No. No, I guess not. Little House, we joked about it, though. Little House didn't necessarily have a lot of happy endings either.
No.
Maybe more than we sort of made out to be, but Rifleman is truly a Western's Western. But at the same time, it has that interesting slant with the father-son relationship at the heart of it. It's a half hour, so sort of these elements give it a little bit different feel than maybe some of the other famous Westerns from that era.
Yeah.
And Rifleman wasn't a huge hit, but, it's endured. I remember it being on in the 1980s on, the old CBN, Christian Broadcasting Network, which became Family Channel. I think that's where I would have first seen Rifleman. I don't remember it being on a ton of other places, but I think because it's owned, I think the production company retained ownership. And sometimes that can be, a ticket to oblivion. But in this case, Rifleman's everywhere. This is one of the, if you're looking for, if you want an opportunity to watch this episode that we're going to talk about, or just catch up on Rifleman, whatever, this has got to be one of the more easiest shows to watch that we've ever done. It's on Peacock, it's on multiple services, and it's on YouTube, like official versions, not just people posting it. I think official versions of it. I think FilmRise is distributing it now. I think they acquired maybe that from the Peter Rogers organization.
Yeah, interesting. The Stars prints are still the Peter Rogers ones.
Yeah, okay. So it was the Peter Rogers organization, which we sort of had some involvement with in a professional capacity years ago, and they were shopping a lot of these programs. And I think something happened where FilmRise just bought outright the distribution rights to that library, which includes I Spy, Moving On with Claude Akins, and Rifleman, and some other shows like this. But yeah.
So when you say the production company, is that like the heirs of, or did someone bought?
The producers. Now, Four Star Productions, which was Dick Powell's company, was the one that put on, but I believe the creators, which would be Arnold Lavin and Arthur Gardner and Jules Levy, I think.
Okay.
So the three of them, the official like creators of the show, I think their estates were the ones that owned it, and they probably sold it to Peter Rogers along the way. Somehow. Okay.
Because I had never heard of the Four Star. I mean, I knew Dick Powell was involved in TV, but seeing that and that it was run by 4 stars.
Yeah.
Literally.
Yeah, and a young Aaron Spelling got his start with 4 Star. But he doesn't. I don't think he had any association with this particular show, except the Rifleman, the pilot, I believe, aired was it Zane Grey Theater, I think. Was it the Dick Powell show or the Zane Grey Theater?
It's Zane Grey
Okay.
Theater.
And that was something that Aaron Spelling first started writing for, and he sort of fell in love with the anthology format as a writer back then. I don't think he had any involvement with the Rifleman TV series, but yeah, young Aaron Spelling was involved with it, and Zane Grey was an anthology hosted by Dick Powell. And a lot of those 4 Star productions, they were good at doing some of those backdoor pilots things. That's how they introduced like Burke's Law and I think a few other programs. But yeah, so Rifleman was on ABC 5 years. Solid show and has had a surprisingly enduring legacy. It's managed not to be overshadowed by all these other westerns, and maybe it's because the people who have the rights are keeping it out there and making it so accessible. So yeah, you can see it very easily for free, and it's also on home video now. So yeah, very easy to see the Rifleman, and I recommend you do.
And I mean, 5 years, but like 160 something episodes, right?
Yeah, I think 168 or 169, depending on the source.
Yeah,
maybe not including the pilot in one, but yeah, that's a lot. First couple seasons, I think ones where they had like 40 episodes the first couple seasons. So it's a lot of Western. But I really like the half-hour Western in particular. I think like the half-hour Gunsmokes, Have Gun Will Travel. I mean, those are just tighter shows. And you could argue like there's some meandering is okay for the Western format in particular. But in something like the Rifleman, you're not going to see a ton of long sequences of them riding horses because they don't have time to do that.
Right. Yeah. And the episode we're going to talk about, we could have seen long sequences of walking.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
exactly.
They know when to put in a dissolve.
Yeah. Yeah. If you see somebody, walking somewhere or on a horse somewhere, it means something usually. Yeah. And that's just, you got 25 minutes.
Imagine if Pray for the Wildcats had only been a half hour.
Yeah. I am trying to imagine that. They would have had to trim a lot of stuff to get down to a half hour, wouldn't they? But a lot of the thematic richness of it would have been lost. The Rifleman, to be fair, had 160 some episodes to tell its broader story.
Yes. And I will just quickly mention that one of my favorite bands, the -5, has a song called "The Rifleman." That I don't know if it's about an actual episode, but it is about Lucas McCain and I think having to kill somebody.
Nice. Well, that's cool. I'm gonna have to check that out because I really like Lucas McCain, and Chuck Connors is not doesn't have the broadest range as an actor, but as a performer in this show, he's great. And he has that presence to him. He's famously a former athlete, basketball player, baseball player.
Right. Okay, let me ask you about
this.
Yes. Wikipedia said he's the only player to have played in the NBA and Major League Baseball.
Believe
Michael Jordan did, right? Did he ever?
Yes.
Did he ever make it to the majors?
Yeah. I don't know. And Danny Ainge might have just been on our Blue Jays rookie card, maybe.
Yeah.
But, well, who might have criticized Wikipedia?
But he's a tall drink of water.
Yeah, and I just like his aura about him, and I like the character. And this is a very family friendly show. It has like a moral code to it. It's father and son, and there's lessons, but I don't think it's preachy. I read a couple of places sort of criticize the self righteous nature of Lucas McCain and everything. I don't really see it that way. No. I don't think he's overbearing or anything. I think he's just a good guy that does the right thing. And these were not modern sources talking about it, but more like from older reference books and things like that. And it's maybe not the kind of show that's going to win a lot of awards and everything, but I think it's very enjoyable. And yeah, I kind of joked. I think that it has maybe 4 or 5 basic plots,
right,
with variations of those, but they work, and especially in the half-hour format, they can keep things fresh, get in and out. There's a bunch of good guest stars in the series and a lot of good stories. I think it's a very well-produced television show.
I agree. And I mean, I haven't seen as many as you have, but he definitely doesn't seem self-righteous to me. If he has a moral problem with people, they usually deserve it.
Yeah.
Like they're murderers or something.
Yeah.
Or sometimes he doesn't. I mean, you can tell he's got an opinion, but he's not. He's actually pretty empathetic about, like one of the Sammy Davis episodes. I guess both of them. I mean, he sort of misjudges him in one of those.
Right.
But so there's one where the second one where Sammy's a sort of spinner of tall tales and gets into a jam, and you can tell he's figured out the situation. McCain has figured it out, but he never tells him he shouldn't have done that. He just works with him to figure out a solution.
Right. He's not a scold or a hypocrite.
Yes.
And I think when he takes stances, I think one thing that adds to him is a lot of times his main thing is protecting his son.
Yeah.
You know, and maybe his own livelihood and stuff like that. But it's not like he's some kind of moral crusader going through the town of Norfolk telling everybody how they should behave.
Right.
Now, every now and then he'll take Mike, he'll fill in for Micah, put that star on, and you know, then he's got to be like the town marshal or whatever, or sheriff. But
Every now and then he'll gun down someone in the street.
Yeah, that happens, and that, that's something interesting, and maybe we might as well just talk about it here because this episode doesn't really get into it. But one thing that's interesting about watching a lot of these westerns today is just how different gun culture was, and there were westerns, and it was just a fact of life. But you watch it, and it's like he's the rifleman, but it's different. I mean, on the one hand, you have a lot of casual handling and wielding of guns, which might, to some modern sensibilities, it might come off as a little odd. But I mean, the old cliche of responsible gun ownership.
Yeah.
Lucas, he personifies that. I mean, he will tell his son, about how to handle it, and he's not reckless with it at all. He's has a gun for self-defense and everything. He does sharpshooting for like contests and stuff, but he's not really prideful about it. It's just part of the life. Now, you do have a bunch of episodes where you have gunslinger culture.
Yeah.
And that's like a totally separate thing. But as far as like just the day-to-day life of it, it's like, actually, this is a very good show as far as like promoting what I would call responsible gun ownership, I think.
Other than him having a heavily modified fast shooting rifle.
Yes, well, I'm not talking about technically accurate, gun depiction, but
well, yeah, I just that one aspect was like, I was like, that's a little too close to things that happen now.
I see what you're saying.
Because he's modified it so he can.
Oh, right.
Rattle off a bunch of shots.
Okay. I wasn't even thinking that way, but yeah.
But yeah, I'm not going to say it's demythifying the West, but in general, the gunslinger thing, he and Micah, the sheriff, don't seem particularly fond of it.
No.
Although, in that Sammy episode with the tall tale guy, when a guy challenges him to a duel, they're just like, the whole town is just like, well, that's what happens.
Yeah.
Not, at least the responsible people can tell, well, somebody's going to get murdered.
Yeah.
And they just like go with it.
Yeah, it's like
it's weird.
That's different. Yeah, and I think that's something that maybe Lori responded to when we watched some of these.
Yeah.
Is that whole thing of there is a certain code. I mean, on one hand, it's funny because like Western seems to be like maybe associated with maybe one political ideology, but on one hand, like a lot of the old Westerns, and not just this, but like something like Have Gun Will Travel and like some of the more adult Westerns, quote unquote, they would demythify a lot of those things like that gunslinger thing. But at the same time, there is also that reinforcement of like a Western code that says, hey, sometimes you just got to do this kind of thing.
Yeah.
But now I think the Rifleman in particular, it does try to present, other solutions and show like different sides of things. It's just as far as, ways to resolve problems, but it does have like a strong moral center. And I think that's why, probably a lot of people respond to it.
Yeah. The other thing is that, at least for me, I take Westerns just like any other sort of mythic genre. And I'm not taking it as a depiction of reality of the Old West or when it was made or now. It's not telling people to live how to live in the 1950s.
Right.
I mean, it does have moral lessons, but it's not like the concrete aspects of it are not like, well, you should carry a rifle around all the time or those things. I don't take it as reality.
Right. Now, a lot of kids
is
watching,
a way to tell a story about something, about people.
I think a lot of kids back in the 50s would,
Yes.
they would go out and play, cowboys and Indians and just simulate, like shooting stuff and everything. But, it would just be kind of like a game for them. It was just, like a different thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, I agree with you. And the main thing is, I think to me, it's just entertaining. I mean, we're, talking about sort of like ideology and the culture of it and everything, but really, and especially like, I think the Western, so many of the great Westerns really wind up as like almost quasi anthologies because you might have a main character, but a lot of times you have like people coming in from out of town, you have guest stars and things like that. And you tell different kinds of stories with that Western format. And it just seems very well suited to that type of thing. And I think some of my favorite, programs in that area sort of play off as, anthologies where you don't necessarily get like a ton of character development, but you get these interesting stories and moral lessons and statements, maybe not lessons is the wrong word, but just, the episodes that are about something.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, McCain in this case, it seems like he's pretty much who he is. But I mean, you see over the course of seasons, Mark physically grow certainly.
Yeah.
But I feel like he's probably, if any character develops, just by the nature of being a kid who's growing up.
Yeah, that's an excellent point.
And going through nigh weekly adventures,
Yeah.
learning lessons that there might be some vague arc to his character.
Yeah, I mean, and Johnny Crawford, who plays Mark McCain, is great.
He is.
He's one of the best, probably, child actors of that era.
Yeah.
Always seems natural, very good, and even in the later episodes, as he's aged, he's one of the few that you're not really annoyed by. The obvious change in his appearance, but it doesn't really lose anything in the performance. I think that's a good way of looking at it. It actually, you see some like development in the character and the performance rather than just thinking, oh, yeah, this is distracting because he's older and he started out as a kid.
Yeah. I was kind of amused in I think the fourth season. His voice is in sort of this, it's not cracking or anything, but it's just in this weird in between place. And then by the fifth season, he almost looks like an adult.
Yeah, and I think it works too because like the central premise of the show is this guy raising his son after he becomes a widow, his wife dies, and he's raising his son as a single dad and teaching him how to be a man. And it's not just like macho stuff, but it's just teaching him how to like do practical things. I mean, like in this episode, we know that this is the second season. Early in the second season, he already knows how to do a ton of stuff just by living with his dad and doing this stuff. I mean, people knew how to do stuff back then.
Yeah.
but along the way, he teaches them about like standing up for yourself and standing up for what's right, doing the right thing. There's a lot of episodes where like part of the drama is it kind of sucks that Mark has to watch his dad be put into mortal danger, but there's a reason for it, and it's often a last resort. Sometimes maybe it's not a last resort, but Lucas has a reason for doing things and he's got to do it. I mean, there's sometimes I've seen episodes where, Mark begs him, why do you have to do this? He's like, I just have to, it's the right thing to do.
Right. Yeah. The other Sammy episode where he takes up the badge, and because Sammy's character is intent on killing whoever is the marshal. Yeah, just as a like symbolic gesture.
Yeah, that's another recurring theme throughout the series too, is revenge. Like there's some good episodes where somebody comes. And I think there's a lot of episodes actually where somebody comes from like Lucas's past and like avenging him, or somebody's avenging Micah or something. And that's part of any Western, just revenge. And I think the show does have some interesting things to say about revenge. It doesn't just lead up to like a gunfight. It'll show you like how they got there, and it deals with it, in its own way. So much respect to the series for that. Sam Peckinpah was, I guess, associated with the development of the show and the original ideas, and eventually clashed. And supposedly, I think the network wanted some of his elements toned down, and that's probably true. I mean, we're talking about it's still basically like a family show. It's not. He went on to create The Westerner with Brian Keith, and that only lasted like 13 episodes, but a lot of like these like sort of more mature themes, he did get to do them in that show, I think. And maybe like a direction he wanted to, a more of a different direction he wanted to take it. I think he got to do that on other stuff, but mention him too for this. But
yeah, 1950s TV seems like a pretty constraining place for Sam Peckinpah.
Yeah. And again, this isn't really a heavy show. This is a very entertaining show. There's light moments. I mean, it's not like a comedy,
right.
But there's more moments, and you feel good a lot of these episodes. So yeah, it's a fun show, I think. And it is kind of cool to see Chuck Connors wielding that rifle and
it is,
and shooting as well as he does.
Yeah. And even if he doesn't in the episode, he does in the opening credits. So
yeah, you always get to see that.
It, yeah.
And he kind of gives that like weird look, sort of like vaguely in the direction of us.
Yeah.
Like he's got his eye on us, Kind of scares me a little bit, intimidates me a little bit. It keeps me in line.
You mentioned him being a single dad. It seemed like in that fifth season, Miss Lou at the hotel had her eye on changing that.
Yeah. Well, I think they tried a couple times. They had the shopkeeper, Millie. They brought her on a little bit before that, maybe a couple seasons before that. And then they tried to bring Lou on. And, I don't know. I like the idea of the way it is.
Yeah.
And maybe I think it's okay to have as a sort of like chaste love interest kind of thing. Yeah. But I wouldn't want to see them all living together.
Well, yeah. I wouldn't want to see him living in town.
No.
Coming into town to get his breakfast every day.
Exactly. Yeah, that's different.
Yeah. You wouldn't want to see her give up her hotel.
No.
She's done wonders with it.
Yes, she has, yes. It did seem like there was a dynamic they were going for, and I don't think they really needed it. I don't mind having a recurring female character. It gives you like more options for like stories and stuff like that, so I can understand that.
Since this episode does not take place in town, let me ask you, do you know, or do you think, was that town on a soundstage, or was it on a backlot?
You know what? I don't know for sure.
Yeah. Something about it seems like it's on a soundstage.
Yeah.
But then some shots look like they're outside.
Yeah,
Or maybe they had both.
It's like a lot of these westerns at the time. Some of them more than others. I really like location shooting in the outdoors ones, and sometimes you get a mix of them, and like sometimes you do get some that are obvious, backdrops and everything. And the Rifleman is not what I would call like a really location centric show. So you do see a lot of like stuff on sound stages in general, I think. But I think it pulls it off. Yeah, I don't know specifically about the town. I think about it, but it wouldn't surprise me if a lot of it was done on sound stages.
But then this episode, it seems like it's all location.
Yeah, and I think there's some shots I think that are not actually on location.
Okay.
But yeah, a lot of it is. Maybe not like huge locations, but yeah.
Right.
I mean, I think they'd probably do something where they would have a certain number of episodes where they would take advantage of that and do some outdoor shooting, and then the rest of it kind of fill in. But yeah, it's cool. I mean, that's one thing I like to see in a Western is you like to see those sweeping vistas and outdoor shooting.
All right. You, having seen many of these, suggested this episode.
Yeah, this is one of my favorites. I remember just being like really kind of into it, Watching it again, I really appreciate it just as much, I think. Mm-hmm. Would you like to know what else was on this night, the night that this episode aired, Mike?
Yes. What night was this?
Well, it was season 2, episode 8 of The Rifleman. And it was Tuesday, actually. So, The Rifleman was mostly a Tuesday show, especially its first couple seasons. And, actually, it was like a top 10 show its first season. And I was a little surprised by this. I didn't know it was that highly rated. And then I think it finished 13th the second season, and then kind of in the 20s. And then it was out of the top 30 its fifth season. But one thing to remember is, like in 1959, according to like at least one source I saw, and this episode was from November 17th, 1959. So that's why I used 1959. But there were 28 Westerns on primetime television on the fall schedule for 1959. Jeez. 28. So Westerns and game shows, I think, were all over the place. So yeah, it was huge, and everybody wanted to have Westerns and everything. And even on this night, we're going to see there were more than one Western on there, but they were just all over the place. It was huge, just a total craze. It was kind of like even more than like superhero movies now and the cinema today, just like Westerns all over the place. But on this particular night, primetime television really started at 7:30 back then. So on ABC you had Bronco, which is one of the Warner Brothers Westerns, at 7:30, and then 8:30 with a Wyatt Earp with our boy Hugh O'Brien. Rifleman at 9, a Philip Marlowe series at 9:30, and then at 10 o'clock, One Step Beyond, and 10:30, Keep Talking, which was a panel game show, which is hosted by several different people, and it's run by, I think Monty Hall was the host at this particular time, young Monty Hall.
One Step Beyond, like a Twilight Zone kind of thing? Yeah.
It was only a couple of seasons. It was the official title was like Alcoa Presents One Step Beyond. So if you look at like some sources, you'll see like just like the name of the episode, I saw like Forked Lightning, and it's like, well, that's not the name of a show, and there's like Alcoa Forked Lightning. It's like, oh, this is One Step Beyond. I think it was officially Alcoa Presents One Step Beyond. So that was ABC. NBC had Laramie, another Western, at 7:30, followed by Fibber McGee and Molly, TV version of the radio show, not as successful as the radio show. 9 o'clock, Arthur Murray's Dance Party. Burt Lahr and Tab Hunter were guests on this episode. 9:30 was interesting. There was a show called Star Time, which had various things under its umbrella, and this particular night had a Valentine de Vaudeville with George Burns in the big time, and Jack Benny and George Jessel were on that episode as well. So you can imagine that. And 10:30 on NBC, I think at this point, it looks to me like NBC didn't really have programming at 10:30, but at least in the New York market, they had Mike Hammer with Darren McGavin.
Oh,
it's Mike Hammer, yes. That was kind of interesting. CBS had a local show in my research in the New York market, again, Grand Jury, which is a half-hour courtroom show. The Dennis O'Keefe Show, a sitcom at 8. 8:30, The Many Loves of Dobie Gillis. 9 o'clock, Tightrope with young Mike Connors, kind of a hard-hitting detective show. 9:30, The Red Skelton Show. Peter Lorre was on this episode. And this is the half-hour version of The Red Skelton Show because at 10 o'clock was The Gary Moore Show. And Gene Barry was a guest on the Gary Moore Show. Not to be confused with Gary Tyler Moore, but the Garry Moore who gave Carol Burnett her start. Oh. And so this night just before Thanksgiving, 1959, and it gives us Rifleman Ordeal.
Do you know if the Rifleman had a regular sponsor, or was that stuff already being phased out by then?
I don't know. It may have, but I haven't seen any like ads associated with it, so I don't know.
Okay. This one begins with Lucas and Mark. They're in the desert, and they've just finished up digging up their meat salt for the year.
Oh boy, what a fun trip this must have been.
Yeah, huh? They're 60 miles from home, and if things go well on the ranch, maybe next year they can buy their meat salt.
Oh. Isn't it funny? I mean, to think that it's more cost efficient for them to go 60 miles out and and haul it back,
or dig it out of the.
Oh God!
What are they digging it from?
Yeah, these are real do-it-yourselfers. These two.
Yeah.
But man.
So they have a wagon and 2 horses, and then there's a rattlesnake and it spooks the horses. And they're already hitched to the wagon. They go running off. Lucas chases them, even jumps on the back of the wagon, but then goes flying off. And the wagon goes over the side of a hill.
Yeah.
The horses don't. They get unattached somehow, unhitched. But it's pretty dramatic.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, Lucas goes kind of flying down a hill.
Yeah.
Rocky hill.
Yeah, and Mark runs up to him and checks, and he's fine, but he sends Mark to check on the horses, and he's going to go check on the wagon, and then they reconnoiter, and the wagon has two broken wheels, I think. Two broken wheels on the front axle or in the front axle.
Yeah, it's something like that. I don't know which is
which,
but
anyway, it's out of commission.
Yeah.
And one of the horses is lame, so Lucas has to do what he's got to do.
Get out his cell phone and call for AAA.
Yes. No, he's got an Old Yeller, that horse.
Yeah.
Now, and Chuck Connors was in Old Yeller, right?
Yeah, I guess he was. I don't remember.
But
Old
the
Yeller.
kid has to.
I remember the book, but I don't remember the.
Oh, okay. I think but the kid has to do the deed, right?
Yeah. I think that's kind of the premise of that.
Yeah.
Lucas doesn't make his son do that.
No.
Matter of fact, again, it kind of emphasized that he's still a kid. He doesn't even watch. I think he knows what's going on, but he turns his head and lets.
Right, but they play the whole thing on his face.
Yeah,
they're not going to show him
right.
shoot a horse anyway, but you hear the gunshot.
Yeah.
So they've got one horse and 60 miles to go. No wagon.
Yeah.
So they can't take the salt. They can't take their water barrel.
Yeah. And here's a great little scene, too, that I like, because Mark, he's kind of talking. He's got this look on his face, and Mark's like, well, just how are we gonna make it with, and he rattles off all the things you just mentioned. Yeah. And Lucas just looks at him and says, well, it's not going to be easy.
Yeah.
But he's like, well, we got to do it, and he's not telling him it's going to be easy, but he doesn't show the doubt. I mean, and they're not at this stage yet where this is like a whole crisis, but they're like, oh man, this is gonna be tough. Huh?
Yeah, but I think a theme of the episode is Lucas having to, knowing more about what's going on and having to kind of keep his game face.
Yeah, and projecting strength.
Yes,
right here, and keep in mind too. I think he's already asked him. He's kind of like shrugged off. It'll become more of a thing later, but it's a nasty spill, like you said, that Lucas took. So he's already hurting from that.
Yeah, I didn't think about that.
And he's trying not to let on, that he's hurt. He's probably a lot more injured than he's letting on too.
Yeah. So they have two directions they can go. One is like a 6 to 7 day walk to a water hole, and the other is 1 to 2 days. So obviously
I'm taking the 1 to 2 days.
Yeah. But beforehand they drink plenty of water, and they give the horse some water, and then they dump water all over themselves to be hydrated, and they head out. And at first Lucas is walking and Mark's riding, and then at some point Mark stops, and because Lucas's side is hurting. I thought it was just, like, oh, he just has a stitch. I didn't think about that fall, but yeah, and he wants to switch, but Lucas is like, well, it's not time yet. Yeah. So Marcus gets down and they both walk.
Showing again the intelligence of Mark. He's young and he doesn't know as much as his dad, but he still knows that his dad's protecting him, and he's like, hey, it's your time now, and he's trying to protect his dad too.
Yeah.
Just little things like this that show the relationship between the two of them, and it's what I like too. Is like he's not like a bratty kid. He's like responsible. He's really a good kid, and he's clearly showing like his affection for his dad, but also just trying to do the right thing by him too, and which is why Lucas has to do the thinking for both of them, because Mark is not the kind of kid that he's not selfish. He's too unselfish, as a matter of fact. If you look at it at one point of view, and Lucas knows that he's going to have to protect him from worrying about him.
Right. And usually when he makes mistakes, they're not mistakes of, like you said, being bratty. Yeah. They're like, oh, this guy helped me out, so we should help him.
Right.
Oh, he's an outlaw?
Yeah, exactly.
It's not. It's just like innocence.
There was one episode. Was it one of the Sammy Davis Jr. episodes? But Lori and I were kind of laughing about it for a while afterwards, because they make a casual reference to him having to stay after. It might have been a different one, but he had to like clean the blackboards because he did something in class, maybe like shooting a spitball. Or
spitball
something like
is the one where the guy's gonna 8 hours to death.
Yeah, and it's like it's like we're like very rare. It's like, man, what was wrong? This is very uncharacteristic of him to misbehave in class. It was almost like shocking.
But then the next scene begins with some very menacing tumbleweeds.
Oh, yes.
I put 4 exclamation points here.
Yeah, they're well deserved too.
Yeah.
Those tumbleweeds make the giant clam in Doctor Who look like snorks or something like that.
I mean, giant clams just sitting there.
Yeah,
tumbleweeds. If what's his face had gotten taken down by a tumbleweed, I would have given him some credit.
Right,
stepping a clam. Yeah, but there's like a big sandstorm, and Mark and Lucas are sleeping, and the storm wakes him up, and the horse bolts, and Mark chases it out into this storm, which is not a great choice. But then they get separated. But then he redeems himself by finding a landmark and calling out and saying, "I'm by this rock. I'm by this rock." And Lucas finds him.
I want to give a shout out to. I think this is just really good, like television production of the time, because the whole scene is like chaotic and without being like too over the top. I mean, it's visually arresting, just the sight of the sandstorm, but like it's really palpable the tension of Lucas just getting increasingly not panicking, but increasingly concerned about being separated from his kid.
Yeah.
And Mark, trying to find a spot. I mean, just a great scene.
Yep. And also makes things much more difficult for them.
Yeah.
So now they don't have the horse, and there's a scene of them like taking a little water break the next day. And then the next scene is they get to the water hole, and the water hole is dry.
Oh.
At first, they showed that little indention. I was like, oh, quicksand.
Oh, man. That's maybe the only thing they didn't have to deal with in this episode. Yeah.
Oh!
Don't worry about me, boy.
Then there's another scene where they're climbing up some rocks, and Mark is ahead, and one falls loose and hits Lucas's foot.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Right square in the man. I thought maybe shattered his ankle at first, but
Yeah.
either way, it did some damage.
It definitely did, yeah. So that's not good. He manages to use his rifle as a cane.
Which is kind of cool. It's a
It
nice
is.
visual and gunman use that as and kind of showing him limping around like that is a pretty cool sight.
Yeah, hopefully he took the bullets out before.
yeah.
Otherwise, that'd be some more bad news. So they have another like 2 to 2.5 days to go now. So later they stop for the night and are drinking from their canteens, and Lucas pretends to drink. And then once Mark is asleep, he pours his water into Mark's canteen. And he also puts his food into Mark's food bag.
Yeah, and this is notable like this in this general area here is because this is the first time you really see fear in Lucas's eyes.
Yeah.
He doesn't let his kids see it, obviously, but you can kind of see he knows this is really dire, that they get, that this could be it.
Yes, which, is good. It creates some tension.
And it's not just his actions, too, but just like the look in his face.
Yeah.
And it's a good job by Chuck Connors. Again,
I think so, yeah.
Maybe, not thought of as a master thespian, but very effective at conveying the situation in this scene.
Mm-hmm. And he writes a letter to Micah asking him, basically, it's like he thinks he's going to die.
Yeah.
To raise Mark as his own.
Mm-hmm. And raise the boy right.
Yeah. And then the next morning he wakes up Mark and he says he's gonna have to go on his own, which of course Mark doesn't want to do. But he says, I thought this was a really good line and good advice. A man's got to use his head when things get rough, which to me sums up a lot of the show too.
Yeah.
Like that he's a smart guy and he's
Right.
always reading the situation, and he's not just firing off that rifle willy-nilly.
Yeah, and he knows exactly that this is the time that they've got to do this right now.
Yeah.
He's made that calculation, and there's no sense in delaying it. So you got to do this now, and you got to convince Mark that it's the right thing to do.
Yeah, and Mark's scared, and he also says, smart man knows when he's scared, which I think is another good line. And he gives him the letter and says it's directions, which maybe it is directions too, but as far as we know, it's just this letter.
Yeah, unless there's something off camera, but I think you're right. Yeah,
Yeah.
and I guess telling him that ensures that
He won't look
that
at
he
it.
won't read it first.
Yeah.
It could be. I hadn't thought of that, but yeah, it could be.
But he gives him some practical advice, it's about pacing yourself and how to. So they're kind of between two mountain ranges. Go towards this peak and keep this other one in sight behind you, and you'll get to this ranch, the Allen Ranch. And they hug, and he wants to give Mark the rifle.
Mm-hmm.
And that, Mark knows what that means, I think. I thought that was a really nice moment.
Yeah.
And he refuses because I think that would be giving up hope.
Yeah, and also, I kind of was thinking about this later. Like, it's almost unthinkable, but if things got really bad for Lucas, would he use the rifle on himself?
Yeah,
I don't think that's. I don't think that's really was
so.
going into his thing. But it's like, well, the fact that he has that here. But yeah, this is a really good scene.
But he's also like, there's nothing that'll hurt me.
Yeah.
And later we see.
Yeah, that's true. And Mark's like, well, then why do I need the rifle?
Yeah.
Then I don't need the rifle then.
Right.
He kind of takes it back and he's like, well, okay. But I liked how he's calm and rationally explaining it. And then there's that one moment where he kind of scares, him a little bit. He grabs him and says, you're going to remember this now, right? And just the look in his face and how serious he is, that hits home for Mark. But it's it wasn't inappropriate, but he had to make sure in that moment, and that kind of shows you how serious it is for him too. But the rest of the scene though, he's very calm and making sure that, that he's not panicking to him. But he has that moment of human emotion too.
Yeah.
When he says, you're going to remember this, right? And gives him that look.
Yeah. And I had the thought, because earlier in the season we talked a little bit about sensitive man Alan Alda. But there's actually a lot of, I mean, it's stoic sensitivity, but his character is not an unfeeling man or anything.
Oh,
And
not at all.
his
No.
relationship, I mean, he hugs his kid. And,
He does, yeah.
And you can tell they love each other. And I want to believe that they had a good relationship on the set too. And there's a stoicism can be a problem, but there is a sensitivity here that I think is, and some of those other, the ward cleavers of the world too, that we sometimes forget in looking back.
Yeah.
And just saying, oh, it's, the greatest generation, but they never talked about their feelings or anything. And
Right.
of course, in the fiction of this, it's well before that, but, I like that.
There's a scene like earlier, when maybe it's when he's talking about writing, he says, we talked about, like lying or fibbing or whatever like that. And he's getting him to confess. And in that sense, Lucas is not being forthcoming to protect him.
Right.
But later, and you just mentioned it, he says like, it's a smart man that knows when he's scared. I mean, Lucas will say things like that and he'll admit, when he's got fear or something like that in him. So that's part of it too. Yeah. That he's generally pretty honest about his emotions. And he talks to his son as appropriate, father-son and the age difference without being condescending. That's one impressive thing about the series is he doesn't talk down to him, and he treats him as somebody that can make his own mistakes sometimes, make his own decisions. He'll advise him in things, but at the same time, like, he'll respect him. Like, I think there's an episode where Mark wants a rifle, and he really, wants to win this rifle in a contest, and at some point he says, well, maybe I'm not ready for it yet, and he's like, okay, we'll hang on to it until you are ready for it, but he respects it, and he respects his son, and at the same time, when it's time for him to make the decisions, he does that too. But it's a very great depiction of parenting in this throughout the whole series, and in this episode is a good spotlight on that too.
So after that, we get Mark walking, but like I mentioned earlier, it doesn't last that long.
You get the idea, though.
Yes.
But it's been a while.
And he stops and rests on a tree, and this definitely looks like sort of like the Joshua Tree area of California. And then we come back to Lucas, and buzzards are circling out.
Yeah, that's not good.
And then we see that Mark has run out of water, and he moves on. And then it's a little later, and Lucas is kind of drowsy, and his lips are all chapped. I liked that they showed some sun damage and stuff. And there's a coyote howling on a ridge nearby, and then he seems a little delirious or something. And he starts talking to like, oh, you want to get in on the whatever he's
on
the meal,
the feast.
The feast, yeah.
He's got desert madness, I think.
Yeah.
You and I have seen this a lot. It's not pretty.
No. And he fires off a bunch of rounds, and then kind of like goes scrambling off on his knees, but he leaves the rifle behind.
Yeah, that was kind of a bizarre moment, actually.
Yes.
I guess that's really kind of showing his delirium.
Meanwhile, Mark collapses, and then later he comes to. There's some hammering nearby, and these guys are mending or putting up barbed wire fence. And some cowboys, and he stumbles forward, and he calls out a few times, and one of them thinks he hears something, but he's not sure. And then they're about to leave, and he cries out one more time, and they find him, and then they ride back. And really, I mean, even though it's gonna work out fine, this is kind of like intense that all these buzzards on the ground eating something. The cowboy fires a shot, and then they go over there, and it turns out it was a coyote. So I guess Lucas probably hit the coyote. They were having their feast there instead. So smart thinking there.
Yeah, I guess it was.
Distract them with a dead animal.
I at first thought that he was kind of wasting some ammunition. But I guess he had method to his madness.
And Mark finds him. They find a little trail, and he finds him, and he's muttering to Micah, about taking care of the boy. Raise him right. And then Mark says, "We made it, Pa. We made it."
Yeah, it kind of ends on him beaming, and it's nice. It's just the sense of like accomplishment. That he's kind of proud, and but it's just like relief and pride.
Yeah.
And then lessened a little bit by Mark immediately realizing, oh, I forgot to bring water back with me. Sorry, Dad.
And we got to go get that salt. We'll have 2 barrels of salt.
But yeah, like the whole last 5 minutes of this are very well done. I mean, you've got Mark straining to have these cowboys these ranch hands hear him, and that's very well done. And then like you said, when they come back to the spot where he left his dad, very well done. And the whole episode is well directed, and the musical score, a lot of times it's effective without being overpowering. Just a lot of elements, the way it's shot and edited Just very well done. And again, just a good example of a tight half-hour Western. I mean, if this were like an hour long, you'd probably have like maybe more like sort of meaningful conversations with the two of them on their trip, and these would probably be good scenes.
Yeah.
But this just gets it done like very quickly and well, not very quickly, but just very efficiently.
Or you might even have like scenes back in North Fork. Like, well, they should have been back from their salt mining by now.
Right. Yeah. And, the things you need to know about the characters we've talked about, they still come out, like the way that they treat each other and the things that they're doing, and they reveal their character and the stuff that they're doing along the way, too. So,
yeah, that's the thing. Even though it's an atypical episode, you don't need to have seen any episodes. You really don't need to know anything to watch. Like, it's just like a short story. Here are these characters going through this experience.
I agree. It's well said. There multiple episodes like this where they get caught in some kind of situation, and they're good ones. Just a really good episode that, like I said, watching it again years after I saw it the first time, it gripped me. I was very into it.
Yeah. So we got the survival episodes.
Yeah.
The vengeance, gunslinger episodes.
Yeah, like you could almost separate them. Maybe I would separate like the vengeance episodes, and the gunslinger episodes where there's a young gunslinger going to challenge Lucas, or an old gunslinger who's being challenged by some other young gunslinger, or just somebody, somebody challenging somebody. That happens a lot too.
Yeah.
And the special guest star episodes, which at the time, it's funny, at the time they weren't like special guest star episodes, but now I see one with Robert Culp. I'm like, hey, cool, Robert Culp's in this one.
Yeah. And he had his own Western at the time.
Track Down, yeah.
Track Down. That's a cool title.
Yes. So yeah, I would, and you just made a good point. I mean, I think you could jump in at any point in this whole series, and if you're interested, look at the episode description, see the plot, or maybe just look for guest stars like Dennis Hopper's in the very first one, I think, and a lot of cool people and a lot of like cool character actors that'd be familiar to a lot of people, from just westerns and just TV in general. They show up time and again in this. You don't have Mike in this episode, but there's a good relationship there too with like Mike as the lawman, and his interactions with Lucas are really good too. Paul Fix plays him and does a very good job with him.
Yeah, I like him. Excellent choice for show and for episode.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. I thought this would be fun to do, and it was cool watching these. I'm try to catch some more of them.
Yeah, and it's funny. Like Stars over the years has tried to evolve its thing, and yet they still have all these westerns.
Yeah, I
assume they still have that channel.
Yeah, the Stars westerns. Just, I think that's one of the things that, you talk about like engagement and churn and things that actually drive subscriptions. And I think because we know that like fans of like old westerns are very loyal, and that's probably driving a lot of their subscriptions, is the fact that they've had these shows on for a while. And to their credit, I think some of the shows, I think they help pay for like restoration and maybe things like Wagon Train and like Death Valley Days. I think they helped like co-finance like doing HD prints and whatever.
Okay.
And they show most of their series uncut too. And
yeah.
So yeah, good for them.
Like I said, the Peter Rogers prints did not look pristine, but no commercials.
Yeah. There is that.
Yeah. So, well, yeah. And if you want to let us know about your favorite westerns, or if you even like westerns, or what you think of Chuck Connors, if you ever had to cross the desert on a horse with a new name, whatever.
What do you do for meat salt?
Yes, what do
in
you
the
do
off-season?
for meat salt?
Do you run to the store and get it, or do you go out and dig for it?
Yeah.
It's probably a lot easier now, I guess.
Right. Or do you desalinate?
Yeah. I can tell you I don't do that.
Yeah, and is meat salt different than salad salt or French fry salt?
Right.
But yeah, we have a Facebook group. If you're into the Facebook and you're on there and you want to join us and talk about these kinds of things.
Yeah, we talk.
Especially meat salt.
Yeah. Salt is we haven't really gotten into salt yet in the group.
No,
I think it's high time we did.
Yes.
A couple of tenderfeet like us, we need to know that this kind of thing.
Yeah. Salt tack.
Yeah. Hardtack.
Hardtack. It's hardtack. It's not salt tack.
Yeah.
Salt is involved in hardtack, right?
Yeah.
Anyway, you can join us there. Or drop us a line at Battle of the Network. What is the email?
Mailbag. At battleofthenetworkshows.com.
Yes. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. We welcome your comments about Rifleman and always suggestions about things we can cover in future seasons. Always like hearing from you, and let us know if you enjoy the retro look we do each season.
Yes.
Because while we still have a lot to cover in the 1970s and 1980s, it's nice to step back into the silver age of television, if you will. And explore that area as well.
And another shout out to Dick Powell.
Yeah.
And Charles Boyer.
Charles Boyer, yes.
Ida Lupino.
Yeah.
On David Niven.
Yeah. The 4 stars.
Those are 4 stars.
They are, yeah.
And then they all hosted various of their shows, right?
Yeah, I think they
Or
rotated, and they would appear in like they had the 4-Star Theater was like kind of like their flagship show when they started,
okay. Yeah.
and they would like sort of rotate like being in a certain number of episodes because it was an anthology show like each season.
Yeah. Okay. All right. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, it is kind of interesting to do something like that today. It seems like you could actually with like have like a 12 episode season on a streamer. Like put a lot of money into it, but instead of having one per, or maybe just do like 4 or 5 like 90-minute shows or something like that, with like really big stars, and just give them like, hey, what's the one passion project you have that you can't do necessarily as a movie? Would you like to do it on TV? Because they were movie stars, not TV stars when they did this.
Exactly. All right.
This episode brought to you by Meat Sauce, straight from the desert. This episode also brought to you by AWA, the American Wagon Association. If your wagon breaks down, just send someone to the nearest town, have them drop us a telegram, and we'll be out to fix your wagon in 2 to 3 days, no problem. This episode also brought to you by Chapstick. Join us next time for another exciting episode of Battle of the Network shows. Learn more, leave feedback, and suggest future episodes at battleofthenetworkshows.com. Follow us on Twitter at BatNetShows, and like our Facebook page, facebook.com/Battle of the Network Shows.